Kings commanded armies. Emperors reshaped borders. They ordered executions, built monuments, and demanded history remember them as gods. History remembered them, just not the way they planned. Power has a way of insulating the powerful from consequences. A king never hears bad news until it's too late. An emperor is never told his plan is stupid. And no one, absolutely no one, will tell the man who controls your salary, your land, and your head that the thing he is currently doing will kill him in a deeply undignified manner. This is a video about 6 rulers. Each of them commanded empires. Each of them died in circumstances their court scribes desperately tried to obscure, reframe, or simply not write down. They failed. King Henry I of England. December 1st, 1135 AD. Henry I ruled England and Normandy for 35 years. He defeated his brother in battle, secured his borders, reformed the royal administration, and by most contemporary measures ran one of the tightest operations in medieval Europe. On December 1st, 1135, he sat down to dinner in Normandy. His physician had explicitly forbidden him from eating lampreys. Small, jawless parasitic fish considered a delicacy in medieval courts. The exact medical reason is lost. The instruction was clear. Henry ate the lampreys anyway. He died 6 days later at approximately 67 years old. The chronicler Henry of Huntingdon recorded the cause without apparent irony: a surfeit of lampreys. Too many lampreys. The man who had spent 3 decades outmaneuvering his enemies, suppressing rebellions, and consolidating power across 2 kingdoms, was killed by a fish his doctor had specifically told him to avoid. The lampreys did not have a doctor. His body was transported back to England. The embalming process, according to one contemporary account, was so poorly handled that it reportedly made the attending physician ill. Henry of Huntingdon records this too, also without apparent irony. England descended into a 19-year civil war over the succession. Lampreys were still served at English royal banquets for centuries afterward. The city of Gloucester sent a traditional lamprey pie to the coronation of Elizabeth II in 1953, King Martin I of Aragon. 1410 AD, Martin I ruled Aragon, Valencia, Sardinia, and Sicily simultaneously. He was known as Martin the Humane, which is either a compliment or a warning depending on what follows it. What follows it is this: on June 31st, 1410, Martin was already ill. The nature of his illness is debated, but contemporary accounts describe him as confined to bed and in poor health. He was also apparently in good spirits. A court jester named Bora had returned from a hunting excursion. Martin asked where he had been. Bora replied, and this is the documented answer, that he had been in a nearby vineyard where he had seen a young deer hanging by its tail from a tree after being bitten by a lion. This was either extremely funny within the specific comedic framework of 15th century Aragonese court humor, or Martin's condition had already affected his judgment. Possibly both. Martin laughed. He could not stop laughing. He laughed for approximately 3 hours. He died. The official cause listed by court physicians was indigestion combined with the laughing episode. The throne of Aragon passed to a distant relative after a 2-year succession crisis, eventually resolved by the Compromise of Caspi in 1412. Martin left no legitimate heirs. He had laughed himself into a succession crisis that destabilized the Iberian Peninsula for 2 years. Bora's subsequent employment status is not recorded. Emperor Yizong of the Tang Dynasty, 873 AD. This segment is technically about one emperor. It could be about 12, from Qin Shi Huang in 210 BCE through the Ming Dynasty. At minimum, a dozen Chinese emperors died from consuming elixirs intended to make them immortal. The active ingredients varied. Mercury appeared frequently, arsenic appeared frequently, lead appeared frequently. The results were consistent. Emperor Yizong of Tang, temple name Qian Shou, died in 873 AD after consuming a series of alchemical preparations prescribed by Taoist practitioners at court. He was 41. His predecessor, Emperor Xuanzong, had died under similar circumstances in 859 AD. The emperor before him, Jingzong, had also consumed longevity preparations. The palace alchemists continued to be employed. The logic was internally consistent in a way that requires some effort to appreciate. Questioning the emperor's chosen treatment was dangerous. Suggesting the emperor's belief in alchemical immortality was misplaced was more dangerous. The physicians who pointed out that mercury was toxic had shorter careers than the alchemists who did not. Each emperor died believing the previous emperor had simply not taken enough of the correct preparations. The actual effect of chronic mercury poisoning includes paranoia, personality changes, increasing irrationality, and a reduced ability to evaluate the quality of the advice one is receiving. The cycle, once established, was self-reinforcing. It ran for approximately 2,100 years. King Adolf Frederick of Sweden, 1771 AD. Adolf Frederick became King of Sweden in 1751. Sweden at this point had a constitutional monarchy in which the king held relatively limited power. This arrangement suited Adolf Frederick, who was, by most historical accounts, a mild-mannered man with a strong interest in woodworking and a notable appetite. On February 12, 1771, he ate the following: lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, and champagne. This was the main meal. For dessert, he had semla, a traditional Swedish cream pastry, served in a bowl of warm milk. This preparation is called hetvägg. He had 14 of them. He died that evening of digestive complications. He was 60 years old. Swedish schoolchildren are still taught this story. Adolf Frederick is remembered in Sweden primarily for this meal. His 14 years of reign, his role in Swedish political history, his woodworking, these are secondary. He is called the king who ate himself to death. His son Gustav III, who succeeded him, was later assassinated at a masquerade ball in 1792, which is a more dramatic death but significantly less Swedish. Semla are still sold across Sweden every year. During Fettisdagen, the traditional season, Swedes consume an estimated 6 million semla annually. Adolf Frederick would have approved. King Béla I of Hungary, 1063 AD. Béla I became King of Hungary in 1060 after overthrowing his nephew Solomon. He had fought for the throne, he had political enemies, he had survived court intrigue, military campaigns, and the complicated dynastic politics of 11th century Central Europe. In 1063, he was sitting on his throne. The throne collapsed beneath him. Contemporary sources, specifically the Chronicon Pictum, a 14th century Hungarian chronicle, record that the throne canopy or the throne structure itself gave way, crushing the king beneath it. He died from the injuries shortly afterward. The exact mechanism is debated. Some accounts suggest the wooden frame of the throne collapsed. Others suggest the canopy above it fell. The Chronicon Pictum was written 3 centuries after the event, which introduces some uncertainty. What is not uncertain? Béla I, King of Hungary, was killed by his own throne. His enemies did not need to lift a weapon. Solomon reclaimed the Hungarian throne following Béla's death, which he had presumably not planned but certainly benefited from. The throne was not repaired and returned to service. There is no record of what happened to it. This seems like an appropriate institutional response. Emperor Frederick III, Holy Roman Emperor, 1493 AD. Frederick III held the title of Holy Roman Emperor for 53 years, the longest reign in the history of that office. He consolidated Habsburg power, navigated decades of political conflict, and outlasted nearly every rival of his generation. He had a problem with his left foot. By the early 1490s, Frederick's left leg had developed what contemporary physicians described as a gangrenous condition, possibly related to gout, possibly to circulatory disease, possibly to the medical standards of 15th century Austria. The physicians recommended amputation. Frederick refused for years. By 1493, the condition had spread. The amputation was performed. The surgeons removed his leg above the knee. Frederick survived the surgery, a non-trivial outcome for a 77-year-old man undergoing amputation without anesthesia in 1493. He died 19 days later from complications. He had spent years refusing the procedure that might have saved him, finally agreed to it at the point when it could no longer save him, survived the surgery itself, and then died from what followed. His physicians had reportedly removed and preserved the amputated leg, intending it for burial alongside him. Whether this actually occurred is disputed. Frederick is remembered as the longest reigning Holy Roman Emperor in history. His epitaph, which he composed himself, translates roughly to, "All the world is subject to Austria. The leg was not consulted. 6 rulers, 6 empires, every possible advantage, armies, physicians, treasuries, the accumulated administrative power of their respective civilizations. Henry I ignored his doctor. Martin I laughed at a bad joke. A dozen Tang emperors trusted their alchemists. Adolf Frederick ordered 14 desserts. Béla I sat down. Frederick III waited too long. None of these deaths were inevitable. Each involved a decision or a refusal to make one, or a preference that turned out to be the last preference the man in question ever expressed. Power does not make a person smarter. It makes them harder to stop. And that, more than anything, is what this list is actually about.